Everyone, my name is Gabriela Zangiski. I am from FGV in Brazil. The paper I'm going to present to you is the first chapter of my PhD thesis, but you can also find me now at the Climate Policy Initiative. So today I'm going to talk to you about politicians' personal preferences and the international environmental agreements. Well, we all know that we are in a very delicate moment regarding environmental issues. We want to save the environment, we want to take more environmental and greener measures, and we have a lot of programs and policies for that. And one thing is that the environment is a public good, so it has a lot of externalities going on. And then we invented international environmental agreements to deal with that. So in order to be pro-environmental preservation and to achieve environmental preservation, we want countries to ratify these international environmental agreements. But we usually think about a country ratifying an agreement as the country itself ratifying. But this is actually not exactly what's happening. The country is represented by a person with his or her own ideologies, thoughts, and personal preferences. So maybe this is affecting somehow the process of ratification, the stability of these agreements, and the whole political process regarding these international environmental agreements. So you probably talk about the Trump and the Paris Agreement. So the US is going in and out of the Paris Agreement. And this is because the presidents have very different personal views. There's a personal political component going on there. And there are more examples we can think about, not just of countries going out of agreements, but not ratifying agreements or having a late ratification of these agreements. And of course, literature has always thought about, not always, but has been thinking about environmental agreements for a while now, and we already know a lot of factors that interfere on the ratification probability. So we know that income is something important, the design of the agreement, and by that I mean dispute resolution mechanisms, financial mechanisms, etc. We know that international relations are very important. So if your neighbors also ratify the agreement, if the countries that are your biggest commercial partners are ratifying this agreement, this is important. We also know that political aspects are important. So what is the quality of the democracy of these countries? Do you have a lot of corruption in this country or not? This can be impactful. And we have some evidence on these personal political views. The only paper I was able to find about it was a paper for the UK, and they were looking into how the politicians in the legislative branch were tweeting about environmental issues and voting pro or against environmental measures, and there is a positive association.
I think you should add to the reference list, double-edged diplomacy. It's exactly about the interplay between the agreements and domestic politics, and Ford Hartman has written about it later.
Thank you. And we also, before we continue, we also must understand a bit how does the whole ratification process works. So it is international environmental agreement is almost a law, or it behaves as a law in the country. So first of all, there is going to be a proposal of this new agreement, and the countries are agreeing on the text of the agreement, the conditions, and etc. And then the executive leader of the country has to decide whether he or she wants to approve this agreement or not. And then this executive leader is going to send to the legislative branch the ratification proposal. And the legislative branches have to vote and decide if the agreement is going to be approved or not. So for an agreement to be ratified, we need these two branches agreeing on that, the executive and the legislative. And of course, there are some differences amongst countries. So some countries require a simple majority, others require a supermajority, but just details. Overall, the process is this one. So given all of that, what I want here is to understand how these personal preferences of the executive leaders regarding environmental issues are related to the ratification of such agreements. So how is this affecting the risk and the probability of ratification? For that, I am using a lot of data. I have agreement data, so I have 263 environmental international agreements. This database was compiled by Belletti and his co-authors. This is an amazing database because they are accounting for lots of agreements, and they are the first ones to account for potential ratifiers. Before that, we were only observing countries that actually ratified the agreement. So we have this bias because we were not observing the countries that could ratify, but just decided not to. And now we have this data, which is amazing. I am also using political views data from the Manifesto project. This is a project from political science group in Germany, and they are always looking into material of campaign material of the candidates and classifying the statements regarding a lot of stuff that could be interesting for the election. So pro or against abortion rights, pro or against environmental protection, immigration, and etc. I am using the pro or the pro mentions pro, sorry, in environmental protection, and I'm getting a lot of data on the country characteristics. And putting all of this together, I have my final sample, and my explained variable is a dummy variable, is an indicator whether the country has ratified or not that agreement in that year. So it is 0 in the year that the country could ratify that agreement, but did not. And is 1 if it's ratified. But for my main analysis, I am using a survival version of this database. I'm going to explain why in a while. But with the survival version, I have the agreement becomes available, then it is 0, 0, 0, then the country ratifies, this variable becomes 1, and I drop this country off my database. Here I have all the sources and the description of my data, and some descriptive statistics. So this main part, this middle part is the version of the data set that I am using for my main analysis. And here we can see the countries that I have in my database. So I'm restricted to democracies because for these environmental preferences, I am using data from campaign material. And so I need to be in a democratic country to have campaign material. So I am kind of restricted. And the Manifesto project is kind of new. So they didn't map all the possible countries. These are the ones that I have.
Sorry if I missed that, but you're looking at the party leader or like the government leader? What's because you're talking about personal views, right?
Yeah, I'm looking to the executive leader, just the elected one.
The executive.
Yes.
And yeah, okay.
And I am applying 2 methods to understand all these relations. The first method is a multi-level survival analysis, and I am using this method because my data is nested. So for each year, I have a set of available agreements, and for each agreement, I have a set of countries that can ratify. So I have this nested structure, so I cannot apply some methods. This is going to do very well with that. I apply a log transformation in my explained variable, also to deal with the fact that ratification is a rare event, and to make our interpretation of the coefficients a bit easier. I am controlling by those variables that I just showed to you, so country characteristics, agreement characteristics, and there are some details on the estimation of that. So to apply these methods, I don't have a closed form solution for my maximum likelihood function, so I am using Bayesian approximation methods. For my coefficients of interest, I am using 1 as the prior, so I am not assuming anything about those coefficients. And for the random effects, I am using the inverse gamma distribution because this is standard in this literature. I would like to use fixed effects, but since this is a multi-level survival analysis, I cannot, so I am using random effects. And here I have the results of the multi-level survival analysis. Okay, so forget about the first line for now. For all the other lines, we have stuff just as the literature told us that we should have. A lot of significant stuff with the signals aligning with what is expected. For the first column, I am applying this method in my whole survival database, so I have all the agreements. For the second column, I am dropping the agreements that are available for ratification for 10 years or longer than that, so I don't have any noise for old agreements that we just don't care about anymore, they are not updated. Anyways, and on the final column, I am using only global agreements. I am dropping the regional ones to make my results easier comparable to the rest of this literature. So, okay, let's go back to the first line. The first line presents the estimations for the coefficient associated to these preferences of the executive leaders regarding environmental preferences. So I normalized this index. So we can interpret this in terms of standard deviation. And
Sorry, one question. For the interpretation, you keep talking about the person preferences of the leader. That's fine for a separately elected president, but the prime minister in a collective parliamentary government, are you using a party classification, or are you using some attempts of coding the preferences of the prime minister?
well, they are only using campaign material. So if the only campaign material available is the party materials, is that what I have?
Yeah.
But I don't know the exact details on the collection and classification.
And so, I'm sorry, because it goes back to my question. So you're looking at the party in power or the views of the individual leader controlling for the party view?
I don't have a party view variable. I just have for the person.
Okay, but then you don't know if it's the person of the party or preference of the population, right?
Yeah, that can be a bit mixed.
Yeah, so one suggestion might be to look separately at the countries that do have a personal leader separately elected, and those that have collective. That would help the interpretation, because we could then make up our mind whether we believe the personal characteristics in the parliamentary case.
All right, thank you. So, okay, back to the results. For this first line, then I have the estimated coefficient associated to these environmental preferences. These preferences for protection of the environment. And for the first column, I have the following interpretation. One standard deviation increase in these statements pro-environmental protection is associated with a reduction of 15% on the hazard of ratifying. So this is a multi-level survival analysis model. So this is not the probability, it's the hazard, right? It's the probability of ratifying conditional to no earlier ratification. So this is what I have. And this is significant. For the other columns, I have similar values, also significant, and with the negative signal. So why is this happening? Well, let this question sit a little bit. Let's talk about the second part of the method, the second part of the results, and then I'll go back to a possible explanation for this thing. So, all right, I am applying also to a fixed effects model. I have the same controls. And now my identifying variation for this part is going to be a change in the government. So I take my explained variable, that dummy indicating whether the country ratified or not that agreement, and I am making a little transformation on that. I identify the moments where the country had a change in the executive leader, and I am creating these new variables that are, has this country ratified this agreement within 1 year after the change, 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years. I have all these variables. So the standard term is 4 years for most of the countries. But within my database, I have a lot of political instability going on. So the mean term duration is 1.8 years, is a bit less than 2. So I am open to all this time windows to see what's happening there. And here I have the results. So for the first column, I have the probability, the effect over the probability of ratification within 1 year after a change in the executive leader, 2 years, and so on. And we have also very significant coefficient and negative. So this means that, for instance, for ratification within 1 year, that if you increase the standard, the preferences for environmental protection of the executive leader by 1 standard deviation, you are associated to a reduction about 3% in the probability of ratification. And is a bit higher for 2 and 3 years, so we have even stronger effect. And take into account that ratification is a rare event in my database, so this effect is actually big. And okay, why is it negative now? I also used a lot of other models. I have some robustness checks, and this is basically always negative. Why is this? Well, my explanatory hypothesis for that is that there is a sort of political friction. There is a kind of a Nixon goes to China effect. So if you are someone perceived by the legislative branch as a politician very pro-environmental protection and environmental measures, you can have the support of the people that already support you, but the opposition is not going to vote for ratification. However, if you are someone known for not supporting environmental causes, if you propose the ratification of an environmental agreement, the people in the legislative branch that already support you is going to vote yes, because they support you, and the opposition is going also to vote yes, because of the thing, because they are pro-environmental measures. So it is easier to get an environmental agreement ratified if you are not a pro-environmental politician. And I want to further explore this. Is this really what's happening? Well, for my first robustness check, my first part of this further investigation, instead of using just this environmental protection variable, I am breaking this into bands, and I am using indicators for politicians being on the top 25% and on the bottom 25%. So if this guy is one of the top 25% people that really cares the most about environmental protection, according to the stated campaign material. And what I find here is that for the top 25%, I still have a significant coefficient and a negative signal, and actually an even stronger effect. So the probabilities of reducing ratification is a bit higher. And for the bottom 25%, I have a significant coefficient, but with a positive state. So this shows that this effect is non-linear, right? If you are a politician that is in the bottom of this distribution, you don't care very much about environmental issues. You are, by increasing a little bit this preference for environmental protections, you have a slightly easier time by getting agreements ratified. I am also including interactions. So if this is really due to lack of political support and political capital in the legislative branch, I can have an idea of what is going on by using this interaction between environmental protection variable and the seat share. The seat share here is how much percent of the legislative branch is supporting you, is in the party alliance that got you elected. So when I include this, it is not always significant enough for all the time windows, but it has a positive coefficient. And the size is about the size of the environmental protection coefficient in the first line. So these things are basically canceling out each other. I also do an interaction with democracy quality. I have positive and significant effect just for ratification within 3 and 4 years, so in the end of the term. And I am also using this RDD close elections estimate to try to identify a little bit more of this effect. So when I apply this, I have a negative and significant coefficient for ratification within 1 year, so my results hold. But for 2 and 3 years, this is not significant. And after 4 years, there is a change in the signal. The coefficient is positive and again, is significant. So maybe there is also a kind of a time dynamics going on here. Okay, before I go on with a bit more results, let's just make this summary of all this robustness checks. So we have found that these personal preferences have a significant and negative effect over the ratification probability and hazard. We know that this is nonlinear, so this effect is stronger in the extremes, in special if you are in the top 25% politicians regarding environmental protection, you have the hardest time getting your agreements ratified. And political support, the seat share variable alone was not really relevant, it was not significant, but in an interaction, it was significant and basically canceled out our effect. Yes?
Sorry, feel free to tell me if this is completely irrelevant, but these international agreements, they don't appear out of thin air, right? The bureaucracy is very much involved in designing them and communicating with other countries and deciding what goes in, etc. And that's quite strategic. You design them with an idea of well, I'm going to put these things into it because I think that Parliament is going to pass, my national Parliament is going to pass this, and then you're bargaining with the Germans, with every other country. And so in a way, the content is also kind of endogenous to this whole story. The piece of paper that arrives in Parliament has had a story that is also dependent on the government and how, the government is going to choose the bureaucrats who are part of these teams, negotiating, etc. I was wondering if this is part of the story or something like.
Oh, I actually think it is. I got a similar comment in another presentation. I am still thinking about how to deal with that, so I am very open to suggestions.
Yeah. I think another way to say that is that there could be an element of strategic delegation. You want to extract some surplus in the bargaining over the agreement. If it is a new agreement that is going to be hammered out, and then it's a question of how advantageous is it to Brazil or to the country we're talking about. So you send someone who is a skeptic and they have a smaller acceptance set. So to the extent that you succeed, then you do better. But that should apply only to new agreements. And I imagine here that you have a separation between agreements that are to be, designed and then potentially underwritten. If it is an existing agreement, but it's already there, it has parameters, then it's just a matter of signing or not. And then, you should perhaps expect a different effect. So that might be a diagnostic to try and see whether such strategic delegation is one.
And your time effect, in a sense, might be that. It's the fact that actually it gets positive over the years. It's actually someone that cares will take the years to negotiate the elements of the agreement that they want to sign in. They were the pledging to.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I do have to take a deeper look into that. Given all of this, I still have a couple more robustness checks. I also looked to the elections vote share. So if this was a candidate elected by a lot of votes or not so much, if the runner-up also what is the runner-up personal preferences, the deviation from these preferences, the deviation from the national average preference calculated using this vote shares. Well, this doesn't tell me a lot. There's nothing significant in there. I also controlled by a preference of the executive leader being pro or against international relations and internationalization in general. And I also get this sort of Nixon goes to China effect. I also filter my database by non-economic agreements. And by that, I mean, I am excluding the agreements that are known to have the most, the biggest economic impacts and discussions about that. And my results still hold. So nothing very important from this. And okay, since there could be this temporal dynamics going on here, I am also splitting my sample between the above median and under median pro-environmental preferences candidates, actually heads of state. And I am estimating the density, the kernel density for both groups. And I am wanting to see how is this density behaving over time. And what I see, well, in the red line here, you see the kernel density estimate for the group under the median. So these are the politicians that don't really care about environment topics. And in blue, you see the politicians that are more pro-environmental topics. And For the first years, so when these guys beginning to their terms, the red line is above the blue line. So it's easier to ratify first if you are not so pro-environmental politician. And there is a crossing lines going on in there, but after that, this pattern reverses and the blue line goes on the top. So it not only is harder to ratify this agreement if you are a pro-environment politician, but it can also take a bit more time. So, okay, what can we take away from all of this? Well, I was trying to understand if these personal preferences of these heads of state are somehow related to the ratification process, if this matter, and apparently it does matter, but not maybe in the expected way, maybe in a counterintuitive way. One standard deviation increase in these preferences is associated to a 15% reduction in the hazard of ratification and at least 3% of ratification probability. And the one potential channel for this is the insufficient support on the legislative branch. And there is this temporal shift, right? The politicians that like the most the environmental issues are going to be the ones that are going to ratify later. And okay, we see that there is this very complex thing going on. Probably there's a lot more to take out from this and to studying this political relations involving personal preferences, involving all the ratification process in here. And we can probably take a lot more from that. Thank you.